Joining me today is the founder of the Internet Emergency and Video Games ER. He's also a therapist, coach, author, and lecturer with many years of experience in working with substance abuse and addiction. Patrik Wincent, welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to this conversation because so many of the things that I talk about on this show come back to the internet. We talk about politics, we talk about sex, or whatever it is that we're talking about, and somehow the internet is right in the middle of it right now. We're connecting over the internet. I watched your TED Talk about all this stuff on the internet, and you talk a lot about internet addiction. So let's first start there. You, at one time, were an internet addict, right?
Well, I used to play video games a lot, so I was a pro gamer, loved first-person shooter games, so I played a lot in my days. But it becomes so rewarding because the games that are MMO, multi-massively player online, the games that you actually go online and play, for me, it was like a new world just entered, so I played a lot. So I played Counter-Strike until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I had to wake up, like 7 o'clock in the morning to go to work. And of course, your body can manage for a couple of days, couple of weeks, even months. But then again, I came to a point where I was totally exhausted and I had to, break out of it. And my friends wanted to help me. So they made an intervention. And actually after that, I went to therapy myself. I was so interested in these area, so I wanted to become a psychotherapist myself and start helping people. But in the beginning, I was doing many other things, like working with alcoholism and drug abuse and those kind of areas. But the last 5 years, I've been specialized in technology, the psychology of technology, which is mobile phones, what technology does to us, as well as video games.
Yeah, and in your TED Talk, you lay out sort of how each of these things is kind of changing us. So I think when people hear about video game addiction, for people that aren't gamers or aren't in this world at all, I don't think they can really understand how that can be addictive. They think of drugs as addictive, or they think of alcohol as addictive. But how is a video game actually addictive? What were you feeling? So it's 2 a.m., you've been playing Counter-Strike for 6 hours. What are you feeling at that point?
Well, first of all, I mean, the word in itself, in the States and even in Europe, we can't call it addiction yet. It depends which country you're at. If you're in China or in South Korea, it is a diagnostic, disease that they treat it as a big problem. But now in the DSM, the manual that the psychiatrists are using, now they're describing in chapter 3 that they're now doing, research if this is also coming here in Europe and in the States. So basically what happens is you have to look where it becomes consequences, in which areas in life, like social areas and physical areas and mental areas. And social areas could be that you are up all night, you don't want to go to school, you are isolating yourself, you're eating, food only in your room all the time, you're having headaches, you're being depressed. So these are the things that they are trying to study. And there are a lot of things that are happening in the brain. The part of the brain that we are calling the reward center of the brain. That is the area which are releasing dopamine, the hormone dopamine in our bodies, which is a pleasure center, which makes us feel good. And that's why we are coming back to, things that makes us feel good. And of course, these things are very normal to us. So we have to, look at things that gives normal releases of dopamine and things that are giving extreme releases of dopamine.
Yeah. How much of this do you think is related to the online part, these massive online games that you mentioned, versus just a traditional game that you might play at a console by yourself? My audience knows I used to be a big gamer, but I'm talking like old school Nintendo and Sega Genesis.
Yeah.
Recently, just in the last couple of weeks, my friend Colin got me a PS4, and I haven't started the online thing yet, but I'm playing some shooters, and I play for literally 15 or 20 minutes. I feel like I get it out of my system, and then I don't have to play it for the rest of the day, and I'll skip a couple days and then play again. But that I'm just playing locally with myself or co-op, with one other person. What is it about the online part of it, actually, the connecting with other people, that actually adds to the addiction as well?
So basically, the difference is when it comes to online is that the games are endless. For one, it's endless. And also today, the games that are created today are very sophisticated. When it comes to gaming developers, they are creating very sophisticated ranking systems as well as reward systems. So basically what we're seeing, not only in my treatment center, but all over the world, it's common things that often recurs. And one thing is the social aspect, that it could be other problems that is from the past. It could be, bullying in school, or, like their parents are divorced and they're having hard time being with their emotions. So they go to the virtual world, which is much more safer. They can just play and go into this tunnel site. They don't have to think about feelings. And also, like I said, it gives us the reward of adrenaline and also the pleasure center of dopamine. So they go to these kind of events. And also the identical aspects. They are creating an identity, of course, online. They're having their guilds or clans, and they're hanging out, which is, of course, very positive. There are so many things. I could talk about as much about the positive aspects as I could about the other things, of course, because I'm a gamer as well. But we have to take a look at what we're seeing regarding studies and research. And the fact is that they're getting hooked. So what the gaming developers are now creating is hooks based on psychological laws. Mm-hmm. Which, for one, is the avoidance of being killed. Everybody wants to avoid being killed, mm-hmm. of course, when you're playing games. And there also been some research about mice. When mice is running in their wheels, mm-hmm. and they had like a metal platter on the ground, and when the mice are, touching that metal platter, they're getting this electrical shock. But on the left side, they have like a stick. And if mm-hmm. the mouse is touching that stick, they will avoid having that electrical shock for 3 or 4 seconds. So the mice are learning this avoidance behavior of not mm-hmm. touching the stick too much, not too little, just enough to avoid getting that electrical shock. And it's the same thing about video gaming. We want to avoid, falling down the ladder, the ranking system. So you are investing hundreds, thousands of hours to becoming somebody, having that identity. And then, say, for instance, you have to go for vacation 2 weeks. So what happens? Of course, you will be punished. You will have to fall down from that ranking system. So that is one of the hooks, and there are many hooks. So,
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that there are positives to this too, because in and of itself, it doesn't sound like any of the, getting a hit of dopamine is nice, right? And getting some social community is nice and all of that. So really what you're talking about is they're adding hooks which are basically crushing our ability to have moderation related to this, and that's what it is. Because when I did YouTube Week here, I had a couple gamers on, and I'm friends with some gamers, and I had a guy by the name of Sky Williams who's a YouTuber on, and he talked a lot about how he had some real pain and abuse in his real life, and that the escape of the video game world actually allowed him to ultimately become a much better person in the real world. So this is really about moderation. And unfortunately, the developers, and that's a really interesting part that I didn't know, the developers are now using our own psychology against us.
Of course, I mean, there are so much good things about, video games. And of course, people that having autism like ADD or ADHD or Asperger, they have a tendency to isolate themselves. So that bridge of playing video games and connecting with people is such a positive thing. But then again, it can be overused as well. It can be only that platform, which means that they're up all night, they're not sleeping, they're spending like 16, 18 hours a day and playing video games because they're so obsessed of becoming this high ranking gamer. And of course moderation is the key for sure.
What about the part of video games that allows us to get the violence out? And I suspect your answer also will be related to moderation. But, a game like that I used to play on the original PlayStation, Grand Theft Auto, I never even played the game to accomplish anything. I'd run around town and I'd beat people with a bat and I'd steal cars and I'd drive into hordes of people. Most of those things I don't do in real life, so I don't think video games cause real life violence. But basically my point being that I got out some aggression and then I didn't feel the need to take it out in the real world. Do you buy that general premise?
I do actually, because there is no, scientific or studies that actually shows the opposite. I mean, many people want to believe that, the school massacres and a lot of these things are gamers, and they were gamers that actually committed that, but there's no, there is no connection of that. And there are studies showing actually the opposite of, people playing, violence in the video games are getting lesser stressed. And of course, I mean, in our bodies, we have this fight and flight system that we have since the Stone Age for sure. So when we play, we will have an increase of adrenaline and cortisol, which is the same as stress hormones. And of course, there is also a term called, gamer's rage. But the gamer's rage is not based on the violent content. It's more based off, you can manage to level up and you get frustrated, so you throw a, controller or whatever. So it's not based on the violence. So actually, like you said, I totally agree that there are many studies that shows that you're not getting violent, that you're releasing instead. So I think that's positive. So you have to be very, observant of when it's overusing, when it comes to hours, when it comes to social, physical, and mental negative consequences. And when those things appears and they're related to a video game, then of course we need to, take a look. Why is this happening?
Yeah, and I know that we could spend easily the whole hour here talking just about video games, and I love the gaming community, and I know I have a lot of audience that are gamers, but I think I just wanted to address that part about the moderation part, and I think most people kind of intuitively know that. So going back to your own addiction to this whole thing, in your TED Talk, you mentioned that it was your son that sort of woke you up to how addicted you were. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, this year it's 10 years anniversary of Steve Jobs' multi-touch technology. It's 10 years since the iPad and the iPhones and the Android technology came out. So basically, this was maybe 6-7 years ago. I was always on my phone all the time, and my son was playing table tennis and he was really good, and I was at this tournament, and he came to the final, and I was sitting supposedly cheering, and he was supposed to meet this guy, and it was 2 points for my son to win. And suddenly I felt a vibration in my pocket, so I looked up my phone, and of course I had a message on Facebook, so I had to take a look. Something new, something exciting. I'm looking at it, and then I hear all the people cheering, and I look up and I see, people crowding around my son to congratulate him because he actually won the whole tournament. But the sad part is that I didn't even see it. So he saw that. So he looked at me and saw that I was looking at my phone. So these kind of things kind of made me think about, Jesus, what is technology doing to us? And me especially. So, that was one experience, but I have many. So
Yeah, I mean, in a way, although it doesn't sound that dramatic, it's obviously upsetting. You know, it's sort of like an alcoholic having their rock bottom moment. You missed an important moment in your son's life. So when you had that moment, how quickly did you try to start doing things to wean off of some of the technology?
Well, I started using meditation, mindfulness, and Vipassana because I really wanted to disconnect and also to be more present in my body because I felt that every time I was reading a book, I couldn't concentrate because I was so used of this scrolling information, bombarded with every information. So when I actually picked up a book, I couldn't focus. So, you know, eventually I started cutting down, and of course, I use technology. I have an iPhone 7. I love it. I think it's positive. But for me, I need time that I can also disconnect and, you know, once a week go out and leave my phone at the door, or not having my phone in my bedroom, or, you know, little things like that. So I can actually learn how to relax my nervous system and my brain.
Yeah, and that is what this seems to be all about. Now, obviously, we're doing this on the internet, so we're not crapping on the internet here, right? We're doing this through this magical thing, and yet at the same time, you can see how we become so dependent in that, you know, I live in LA here, I can't figure out which way is north, south, east, west anymore because I take Ubers most places, or I look at Google Maps when I'm driving, so I don't even, none of that stuff matters anymore, and that does disconnect us from something that's very human, right?
Of course. I mean, we as humans have a primitive instinct of having control of our surroundings. So when we then have this device, this mobile phone that gives us this access, of course have a tendency to pick this phone up all the time. There are studies showing that we pick up our phone 150 to 300 times per day.
Wow.
And also 25% of every car accident is based on a telephone. Like, you cannot actually drive your car without looking at your phone. 25%. So basically, these kind of behaviors are coming more and more. Studies are showing, you know, babies are having motorical difficulties. You know, they can swipe and find easily a reward system, but they're having hard time even speaking and, you know, grabbing a pen or a paper. So, of course, new things are good, but it takes 50 generations to change our DNA. So in the future, we will, of course, adapt to technology because technology goes in such a rapid pace. So, but we as humans has not changed since the Stone Age. We have the same brain, we have the same nervous system, we have the same everything. So, of course, it's logical. We're bound to collide because we can't multitask. Our brain cannot divide their attention because that is what technology wants us to do, is to be more efficient, to do many things at the same time.
Yeah, so is that the great irony here, that we do all these things to hopefully become more efficient, have more time to then maybe spend more time with our families and all of that stuff, and then we spend more time with our families and then we're all sitting around. I mean, you see this at restaurants all the time. You see a family, 3 kids and 2 parents, and literally everyone's staring at the screen, and we're not having that human connection, which is far more important.
Well, look, I mean, once again, we're not going back. We're not going to live in the woods, you know. we of course have to look forward, but I think we have to be more disciplined. I think the thing about our technology is to look at it as a digital diet, just as food. You know, we can't eat food 24 hours a day, you know, and it's the same thing with technology. Even computers need to reboot. They have to shut down and to, you know, turn on again. It's the same thing with us. We're humans. We have to have that connection, eye contact, you know, learn how to distinguish body language, stuff like that. Especially for the young ones, because the brain develops 200% per year until they come to the age of 5, and then it continues to grow until it becomes 25.
Yeah. So do you happen to know of any studies they've done in terms of memory or attention span related to all of this? Because one of the things that I find as an interviewer, I find often that you can tell when people are losing their train of thought, you know, young people that don't have a medical condition or anything like that, or just in general when I'm talking to people more, and even myself sometimes, if I'm on my phone for a long time and then I get into a conversation, I do feel like my memory's a little screwy, or my ability to hold a long train of thought or something like that. Are there studies on that?
Yes, there are. Basically, what we're doing now because of the technology is that we're using the short-term memory more instead of the long-term memory. So based on the information that we are getting bombarded, scrolling, I mean, the attention span of a millennium kid today is about 8 seconds, and a goldfish has attention span of 9 seconds, so 1 second more. So
Yeah.
basically, before we had 12 seconds, it's become now 8 seconds. So to get their attention, we have 8 seconds to do that. And just look at the school system. It's very, very ancient. So of course, they are finding schools very bored. But going back to the short-term memory is that, so let's say, for instance, I have a paper I have to, type and do. And if I get an SMS, that will take my focus. So if I want to put that and get back to my paper, it's going to take me 24 minutes to get full attention. So basically, the multitasking is what is activating our short-term memory. And it's just a myth that we think that multitasking is something that is positive. I see and I talk to a lot of kids that think, doing 4 or 5 times at a time it's no problem. They're Google something, they're having their Facebook, they're chatting, they're doing many things at the same time. But the result in itself is becoming very bad. So if you do 4 things, you're going to get 25% of the result because the brain has to divide their attention. If you do 2 things at the same time, you're going to get 50%. If you do 1 thing and that thing only, you're going to get 100% of that result. So to activate the long-term memory, you have to shut down everything else and just do that. And So basically what happens is that you're integrating that information. You are turning that information into knowledge. It will stick. If it's short-term memory, you're going to forget it.